When someone says a game by Electronic Arts is a letdown, disappointing, or just flat out bad nowadays, it's hard to feel surprised. I mean, when your company has a long and detailed history of its controversies to the point where it has its own dedicated Wikipedia page, it's hard to act shocked when another bullet point is added to the list. But Electronic Arts were once titans of the gaming industry, putting out such classics like SSX Tricky and Matt Hayes Fishing. Out of those classic franchises, a standout fan favorite is the Need for Speed franchise. Listen, I don't think Need for Speed needs any introduction. Pretty much everyone, even outside of people who play racing games, have fond memories of playing at least one Need for Speed game. And most people will probably bring up either Need for Speed Underground or the legendary Need for Speed Most Wanted.
First, I'm gonna take your ride, then I'm gonna take your girl. Get ready for that.
I think it's safe to say that 2005's Need for Speed Most Wanted was nothing short of a massive success, selling the most copies out of the entire franchise. Before the release of Most Wanted, Need for Speed had basically been split into two categories: underground tuning centered around everyone's favorite ship boxes, and running from the heat in foreign supercars. But with Most Wanted, Blackbox decided to mix the two together, creating the formula we see nowadays in most modern Need for Speed games. Needless to say, Most Wanted was incredibly successful, not only in sales, but also in innovating the franchise. So because of this, EA and Blackbox went ahead and followed up the game with a sequel that everybody loved and praised, right? Well, kind of. While Carbon is a direct follow-up to Most Wanted and a continuation of its story, it wasn't really the Most Wanted 2 everyone was expecting, which left people wanting a sequel to the 2005 entry. And in 2012, EA would deliver. The only problem was this wasn't a sequel either. This was a reboot, and in all the wrong ways. My name's Heiko, and today I'm going to take a look at what happened, how the hell we went from this to this, and if Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 is even a good game if you take away its infamous name. Now, between the launch of Most Wanted and Most Wanted, the keys to the Need for Speed franchise swapped developers, from Blackbox to Criterion after the failure of Need for Speed The Run in 2012. Now, Criterion is best known for the Burnout series, which is its own separate thing from the style of Need for Speed. But after the release of 2008's Burnout Paradise and its subsequent DLCs, the franchise was put on ice despite positive reviews and high sales of the final entry. So, with Burnout still fresh in their minds and the devs over at Blackbox still busy working on The Run, the keys to the Need for Speed franchise were given to Criterion for a test drive. In 2010, Criterion put out Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, which was a reboot of the game of the same name from 1998. For a first attempt at a new franchise, Criterion did pretty good, delivering a still pretty faithful reboot of a cult classic, garnering positive reviews. But once Blackbox was basically sent to the Shadow Realm after the botched release of The Run, Criterion stepped up to the plate to deliver what was supposed to be a sequel to the beloved Most Wanted. Yeah, it turns out originally this was never supposed to be a reboot, but rather a sequel. There exist early dev builds and trailers of the game that show it was more akin to the 2005 entry in tone and nature, along with in-game garages that can still be glitched into with underwhelming results. The thing is, this early build that was more like Most Wanted 2005 didn't last very long, considering the game began development sometime in 2011, and by the start of summer 2012, Criterion had already dropped the Most Wanted 2 idea. Now, why this is for a multitude of reasons, whether it be meddling from the higher-ups at EA, heavy time constraints, the fact that Carbon already exists, or just a changing market. Either way, we ended up with this. One thing that gets brought up a lot with Most Wanted 2012 is that it's a lot like Criterion's previous Burnout Paradise. That is, if you forget they made Hot Pursuit 2 years after Burnout Paradise, and 2 years before Most Wanted 2012. Anyways, what if it is really just Burnout Paradise with real cars and police? What if you go in with the mindset that this isn't a Need for Speed game and instead is just Burnout Most Wanted? Unfortunately, you can't just put a brand new label on a stale jug of milk and expect it to be brand new. No matter which way you want to label it, it still sucks, but the question is it really as bad as people remember? You know, for being known as one of the most hated Need for Speed games, it's hard to argue that it doesn't have one of the best openings in the franchise. The opening cinematics mixed with Muse's Butterflies and Hurricanes makes for an incredible intro, and it sets your expectations way too high. Before I get into everything this game fucks up, I'll mention a few of the things that this game did right. Pretty much every prior Need for Speed game has had an amazing soundtrack, including the original Most Wanted. And thankfully, Most Wanted 2012 lives up to that tradition. The incredible list of licensed music music includes highlight tracks like a remix of Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who and I Am Electric by Heaven's Basement. There's only a few weak tracks overall, but pretty much everything else is amazing. On the PC version, when it works, the game looks pretty damn good for a 2012 game. But not only did it run like ass on my PC for no discernible reason, no matter how many fixes I tried, I also eventually just gave up and didn't play the PC version. I instead played on the Xbox 360. The game's graphics have their moments, but the frame rate drops, terrible pop-in, and extremely bipolar lighting keep the console version looking pretty disappointing. Despite being based on the depressing shit stain of the East Coast, Fairhaven is probably one of the best racing game worlds out there. Every road in this game is designed for constant high-speed driving. Whether it's tight city streets or the winding highways, all the roads feel great to navigate. The variety and settings around the map keeps the world feeling fresh with a bunch of unique areas, the best one being removed from the original game and locked behind a paywall. Since this game is pretty dead on console and I refuse to pay for Xbox Live Gold, I wasn't able to get any of my own footage of the multiplayer in this game. But from what I've heard, seen, and can remember, it's pretty damn good. Which isn't a shocker considering the fact that the last open world racing game with an emphasis on multiplayer that Criterion made was this one. And yeah, that's all the good things I have to say about this game. So, what's wrong with it? Well, I already mentioned that on console it looks and runs just about as good as the Chicago Blackhawks play, so we're already off to a bad start. The first thing you'll notice about Most Wanted that's different from not only every other Need for Speed game, but literally every other racing game is the jackspot system. Drive up to a car and jump in, that's your car now. You don't have to pay a dime, you don't lose it when you get busted by the cops or lose a blacklist race. That is your car from now on until forever, no caveats. Now you might think that this system is a tad bit flawed, considering that you start in a base model Porsche and can immediately drive to and jump into some of the best cars in the game. Do you see the problem? In one of my old videos from over a year ago, I mentioned how the three pillars of a good racing game are a strong atmosphere, progression, and gameplay variety. Most Wanted 2012 can only claim a good atmosphere to its name. While the game forces you to drive a handful of different cars to rack up enough speed points to challenge more of the blacklist drivers, creating sort of a quote-unquote variety, the racing itself is stale after a few hours, and if you don't go out of your way to force progression by starting in slower cars and working your way up to the supercars, you're just gonna get bored of the back half of the game quickly because you've already spoiled it for yourself. This is the reason that progression systems exist in games, to prevent this blatant problem. And to the people who defend this decision by saying that it allows the player to play the game how they want and make their own progression, imagine if you started Skyrim at level 100 with everything and you were just told to play the game however you want. It would destroy the game and you'd barely play it. This is the exact problem with Most Wanted, and the reason why racing games with a good progression pipeline are loved, and these loads of shit aren't. Now, how about car customization? A staple to the Most Wanted and Need for Speed name. There is none. That's right, you can change a few performance options in the color of your car, and that's it. Now, this should have been expected considering that Hot Pursuit and Burnout Paradise didn't have really any customization either. But I mean, come on, Burnout never had any customization, and Hot Pursuit was a remake of a game with barely any. Most Wanted built on and fleshed out the customization system created by the Need for Speed Underground games. This game was famous for its customization, and its reboot has absolutely none of it. Now, you can theorize that there was supposed to be customization since the game was supposed to have garages before they were left on the cutting room floor, so this all could just be chalked up to time constraints on the behalf of EA. Another thing Most Wanted was famous for, or rather infamous for, was its story. The story of Most Wanted 05 boils down to you losing your car in a race, almost getting thrown in the can, getting out and going after the 15 blacklist racers to get your car back, something, the end. It wasn't a groundbreaking story. Hell, it wasn't even a good story compared to other story-based racing games. But what it lacked in philosophical writing, it made up for in sheer stupidity. The story is dumb, the characters are dumb, the premise is dumb, but the game and its writers knew that, which made for one of the most memorable and loved stories in racing games. So when it comes to its reboot, you'd think they'd do at least a half-decent job at living up to its predecessor, right? Well, they tried, but we all know how that went. Most Wanted 2012 has zero story, nothing. So instead, we get a few lines of dialogue from a disembodied voice. There's no antagonist, no protagonist, a flimsy motivation at best. The game tells you you need to beat each one of the blacklist members, of which which by the way, there are 15 in the original and only 10 in 2012. But like, okay, why? Why should you care about becoming the most wanted? There's no reason, no motivation, no brainlet moron jackass who stole your ride giving you a reason to get back on the streets. It's like being told to go from point A to point B without knowing how to get there or why to go there in the first place. Does anything happen when you get to point B? No. Does anything happen if you don't? Well, you save a few hours you could have wasted. Okay, the writing sucks, but is the gameplay fun? No! The driving is at best passable and at worst insufferable. Why, you may ask? 3 little things called input lag, crash cam, and a weird as shit handling model. No matter what console you play on, you will experience some form of input lag, and unless you mod the game on PC, there's no way to get rid of it. For some fucking reason, they added a crash cam in this game as well. You don't get a fun crash cam whenever you take someone down. You only get one when you crash, and it completely slams the brakes on the flow of the game. The only reason this exists is to punish you for Criterion making a game that plays like garbage. The handling model isn't much better either when you get rid of the other issues. I know that this game is one of the big proprietors of the break the drift handling model, but me personally, I don't mind it. What I do mind is the fact that almost every car, especially the late game ones, are all incredibly stiff when not drifting. Okay, so the handling is a bit iffy. Okay, maybe a lot iffy, but is the racing fun? No. When you get in a car, you're given the option of 5 races, not counting DLC races. And you might think that since you only get the choice of 5 per car, these races are unique and well made. Yeah, no. Most races are used multiple times between cars, and the modes of circuit, sprint, speedrun, and ambush aren't new or innovative. The AI is so fucking brain dead that most of the time they'll just crash into a wall or an oncoming car and hand you the win on a silver platter. The only real kind of fun event are the ambushes, mostly because the pre-race cutscenes feel like a really bad acid trip. But the cops in this game are so fucking moronic that it's basically a walk in the park with these races. Speaking of a walk in the park, this game is far from difficult, and the progression of difficulty is pretty much non-existent. Hard races aren't hard, and the blacklist races are pretty easy considering the fact that the AI will just crash itself out. Listen, it's obvious I don't like this game. It has its many flaws and fails to live up to the Most Wanted name. It doesn't really fit with the rest of the Need for Speed franchise or even the Burnout franchise. It kind of just floats in a void and stands as a reminder that if you ignore the core values of game design, it's not going to go very good. Thankfully, the Need for Speed franchise has sort of got itself back on track after a few more bad apples and the semi-successful launches of Heat and Unbound. Looking at what Criterion has done before and after Most Wanted, it's obvious that it wasn't really their fault that this game turned out the way that it did. Okay, maybe a little bit, but still, the Rush game was a product of higher up orders from Electronic Arts. Could this game have been better if it was given more time? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to say yes because Criterion is a talented dev studio that has put out masterpieces in the past, but part of me says no because even if they had more time to iron out the kinks, the looming shadow of EA gets the final say on what goes, so who really knows? Overall, there's a lot wrong with this game. The biggest issue is that the game really doesn't give you a reason to play it. There's no challenge, no progression, no story, no fun, and that's the reason why Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 is so unfortunately bad.